Hey guys, it's Jordan with your weekly Refuge video. Glad you're joining me here. We're in week 3 of our series, Family Matters. Now, if you remember, the first week we talked about how love should be the foundation of your family. Then we talked about how even if your family is fractured, like every family, they still matter. And there's still things God can do. He's not done writing that story yet. Well, in week 3, I want to start by stating something pretty obvious. Change happens. Now, think about it. You probably don't listen to the same music you did 3 years ago. You probably don't dress, thank the Lord, the way you did 2 years ago. You don't look the same as you did in middle school, you're in middle school, in elementary school. You don't look the same, and it'd be weird if you did, right? Now, these changes are, for the most part, expected, whether it's changes in fashion or taste in music, stuff like that. That's normal. Those things change. Now, there are changes that are unexpected. These things show up out of nowhere. And they hit us hard and they can be pretty difficult. For instance, maybe you had a friendship that changed. You were really close to somebody and something happened and it took you two in different directions. You don't know if that friendship will ever be the same. That kind of stuff is difficult. Maybe it was a group of friends. You were in, now you're out. And you're dealing with the confusion and the pain of figuring out, well, what do I do? And how do I find new friends? And that was my friend group. And it's all weird now. Maybe you change locations. New town, new school, new house, all that kind of stuff. And it's like you're figuring out, finding yourself in a new place, a new landscape. It's not easy. That change is really difficult to handle. Unexpected changes like that, they have a way of just disrupting our lives. And that's what we're going to talk about today. I could go on with the many examples of unexpected changes that come in and disrupt life. We could talk about health issues, sickness, illness, even death of those we know and love. Those are huge, and they really change our lives. Financial stuff. Money, unfortunately, is a foundational thing of life. You need it, right? And when you don't have it is when you worry about it. And so with you, your parents, your family, financial strains can hit and they can change everything. Or personally for you, your school, your friends, your dynamic, getting cut from a team, failing a class, changing schools, all that kind of stuff. It just disrupts your life. The famous philosopher Lao said, changes, they might drive you half insane. It doesn't matter how old you are, how much money you have, if you're rich and famous or not, change hits us all. And because of that, we all want some sense of stability. Person, place, thing, something that's just always there for us, because change hits and change is difficult. So we all want something stable. Now, what's interesting is all of us consider our families should be that thing for us. Now, for some of you, maybe it has been. For others, it's never been a stable, safe place for you, right? But either way, whether it's our experience or our belief, we think family should be a constant. Even when it's not, we expect it to be. And that's why change in our family can be so difficult to handle. And I think there's a reason. I think our families ultimately, if in a perfect world, would be constant, would be stable. But because we're in a broken, fallen world, man, they're not. And so it hurts when we face that change that happens. Maybe your parents got divorced. You looked at them and you thought, man, they're going to be together forever. And then you find out, no, there's been issues for years, and they finally split up. Maybe you had a parent pass away. It was an illness you saw coming for a long time, or it happened like that. Either way, there's no way to prepare for that kind of change in your life and in your family. It's difficult, and it hurts. Maybe it was something smaller, Maybe one of your parents got a new job, so they're commuting a lot, they're working out of town, and you don't see mom and dad every day the same way you used to. The family structure, it's not what it used to be. It changed. Maybe good news, new addition to the family, new baby brother, baby sister, but it changes the dynamic of the household. You don't get the attention you used to. You're not seen in the lineup the same way you used to be. And so it's a good thing, but it changes. Or as life goes on, an older sibling, maybe they moved out, went to college, went to school, went to work, whatever it is, and you're happy for the extra space, you're happy for kind of some calm, but at the same time, You miss fighting over the bathroom with them. You miss sharing clothes. You miss the stability they brought. to the way the household ran. It changes things. See, no matter what your experience is with change, something about it happening in our families just makes it more difficult. Well, the question tonight is, if avoiding that change isn't possible, can we get better at handling it? Is there a way to make that inevitable change not make us cynical or bitter? And how can we be best prepared for those changes when they come? Well, as always, we're going to go to our Bibles to get some answers. Now, when you look at the Bible, you might be surprised to find out a lot of the writers are actually very helpful when it comes to this topic of change. In fact, in the Old Testament, there's a book called Ecclesiastes written by Solomon. Solomon was an ancient king of Israel, but he was also blessed by God with wisdom above anybody who ever lived save Jesus when he came down in the incarnation as a man. And so we have Solomon, this ancient king, who's just wise, right? And wisdom is not just knowing things, it's knowing what to do with what you know. So you might think, well, okay, great, there's an ancient king who's really smart. What does that have to do with me, with my life? How does that help the change I'm dealing with, the changing my family that we're talking about? Well, I'm glad you asked, because Solomon's going to write down some things at the end of his life he's observed through life. And in his wisdom, he says this. This is in Ecclesiastes 3, verses 1 through 8. You might recognize these lyrics because there's a famous song from these lyrics. It says, "There's a time for everything, and a season for every activity under the heavens. There's a time to be born, and then there's a time to die. There's a time to plant, and a time to uproot. A time to kill, and a time to heal. A time to tear down, and a time to build up. A time to weep, and a time to laugh. A time to mourn, and a time to dance. A time to scatter stones, and a time to gather them. A time to embrace, and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to search, and a time to give up. A time to keep, and a time to throw away. A time to tear, and a time to mend. A time to be silent, and a time to speak. A time to love, and a time to hate. And a time for war, and a time for peace." Now, this is basically a poetic way of saying, everybody get ready. Change is coming. It's going to happen. Nothing stays constant. The good he listed, the bad he listed, it's coming, it's going. None of it stays forever. What you're experiencing today will look different tomorrow. That's the world we live in. So Solomon's saying you might as well get used to it. He's not saying I love it, not saying it's all good. It's just the world we're in right now, this broken, fallen, sinful world. Change happens. Every season will come and go. Every season will change. Now, in some ways, I know that may not be what you want to hear. It's a little depressing, right? I wish Solomon said, hey, here's what you need to do to keep change from happening and to keep it from hurting. That's not what he says. In fact, he said the opposite. He lets us know that everything changes at some point. It's inevitable. But the truth is, when we accept this, when we know this, when we think this way, when we understand that both in our families and the world around us, change is going to happen, you can be better prepared to deal with that change. Instead of fighting change or pretending like it won't happen or you can fight it, we can open our hands and let go of control or the illusion of control that we thought we ever had to keep things the same way they were all the time. It's never going to happen. Change is coming. Change will happen. Now, if you're in a good season, that can seem really sad. If you're in a bad season, that's really hopeful. Either way, change will happen. But here's the cool part. Here's the thing I want you to hold on to tonight. God is fully aware of everything in our lives, of every change that's coming in our lives. He knows the good and he knows the bad. He knows it's going to show up in our life, but he also knows it won't last forever. God knows. In this life of constant change, God makes a promise. Makes a promise to us. Now again, the promise is not, I'm going to make the difficult changes go away, or I'm going to keep changes from even happening. That's not what he says. In the book of Isaiah, God sends a message through the prophet to his people Israel. Now Israel had rebelled, and after a long period of this, God brought the same judgment he promised to the other nations. There's questions of when Isaiah was written, but it doesn't matter for my point tonight. Whether it was in the Assyrian invasion of Israel, whether it was the Babylonians taking out Judah, whether it was the captives being taken away to Babylon, this is a lot of change. A lot of change and a lot of bad change, right? In other words, their world was falling apart. They were forced to leave their homes and live in a land with people who spoke a different language, worshipped other gods, not good rituals, bad stuff, and people who were very hostile to their faithful, God-fearing way of life. This would be like America being invaded by some other nation, and they outlaw China. They outlaw Christianity, right? They're not nice to us. A lot of people die in the transition. Many of us get uprooted and taken back to China. That's what these people are going through. You could say that's a change. Everything safe and secure and normal they knew, gone. Okay? So what does God say to those people? When he sends a message through his prophet, what do you think he says? Clearly, he's not going to say change isn't going to happen or it won't be difficult. They're in the midst of difficult change. This is what he says. Isaiah 43:2. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. When you pass through the rivers, they're not going to sweep you over. You're not going to drown completely. When you walk through the fire, you will not be burned. The flames will not set you ablaze. Now you might be thinking, but you just told me a bunch of people died and a bunch of bad things happened. This is the point he's making. God says, ultimately, I'm in control and I'm with you. And this is not the end of the story. Imagine the comfort this would have brought the people hearing it. When everything around them was changing, God says, I'm not going to change. I'm with you. I'm constant. I ultimately have your back. What a comforting word. In every single moment and season of change, including family change, God says, I'll be with you. I'll walk with you through that change. I'll walk with you through that difficulty. God says you're never alone. And God's never caught off guard by the changes in our lives, and he promises to be with us. This is how much he loves you. And he has something in store for us bigger than the things we grasp onto in this life and we want and we need and we can't lose and we don't want to change, or the things that come in. God says, whoa, I got a bigger perspective, a bigger idea than you do. Trust me. Walk with me. And he says, I'll walk with you. I won't leave you through that change. All right, so back to family change. We can't control the change. We can't control the change in our families. So what can we do? When the difficult things start happening, we go through a season we're not fond of, when we lose a season we were fond of, what can we do? Well, I think based on tonight, we can start by focusing on us, on you, on your mindset, on your thinking, on your expectations, on your perspective. You can change the way you look at change. Let me put it this way. When your family changes, your mindset matters. Your family changes, your mindset matters. When someone in your family moves in, your mindset, your perspective, it matters. Someone moves out, your mindset, your perspective, it matters. So you can't control the external circumstances, but you can control the way you see it, your perspective, the way you view it. And you can remember that God is with you, even when they're not. Okay, here's a few steps. Just 3 things I want you to remember for this tonight. Understand, number 1, that change will happen. That's why what Solomon said in Ecclesiastes is so powerful. He said, sorry, Buttercup, it's happening. Change is happening. You can't fight it. Just accept it. Change is going to happen. There's a time for everything. Nothing stays the same forever in this life. Now, understanding that doesn't make it easy to handle, but at least we know. Right? At least we're going to face facts like adults and say, all right, change is going to happen. Number 2, know that God is with you. Like Isaiah said, when you pass through the fire, the waters, I'm with you. I'm never going to leave you alone. Whatever change you face in your family, God says, I'll be right there with you in your corner, working in you and through you, helping you, comforting you, if you'll let him. Number 3, and this is the key tonight, trust that God can use that change to bring something beautiful and wonderful in your life and in your eternity, in the lives of those around you. God can use your time of transition and adjustment to grow you. I mean, what an amazing thought. To grow you in ways you never expected. I was going through a time of really difficult change in my life. And I was reading an old sermon, and a guy said, I was being stretched by God, and it was painful. And he says, I felt like my arm was in a vice, being stretched. And I cried out to God, God, please stop this pain. It hurts. And he says, at the end of it, I realized that God was growing me. And being grown, stretched, it hurts. He says, but to use the analogy, my arm was stretched, and it was painful. And then I saw a man who was drowning. And because of my experience, I was the only one who could reach him and save him. You're being taken through seasons right now, and I'm not saying God causes the pain. That's our sin. That's our broken world. But God can use it, and he will if you'll let him, to grow you. So when you find someone else going through it, it's not just about you. You can help them. A little side note, but I think that's important to say because I've been living that in these years of my life where it's like, God, why did I go through that? And it's like, okay, that's not why I went through it, but you use that so I can help somebody else who's going through it. Changes your perspective. God can do something in and through us in our time of change, but you have to think long term. It can't just be immediate. We live in a world that wants immediate results. And God's saying, I'm playing the long game. I'm establishing a place in heaven where we're going to enjoy God who won't change for eternity. But in the meantime, to get there, we have to have some faith to say, all right, God, you're doing something here. I'm going to follow you through the ups and downs of life and the changes. We're going to think long term and know that there's something after this. May not just see it yet, but I trust God. All right. If we can begin to see change this way, you can almost start to embrace it. Not that every change is good or every change you love it, but you see it as something that God can use somehow for good in the end. That you can be a change agent for good in the midst of it. That change has the potential to be something to grow you, to mature you, to make you more of who God wants you to be. That's a powerful change of perspective. Now, without question, change is difficult, right? New season, new house, new town, new stepmom, new normal, right? Bam. Change is difficult. And it's especially difficult in our family. Just remember, though, you're not alone. One, as Solomon said, you're not the only one going through it. Number two, you're not alone. As Isaiah said, God is with you as you go through it. And I want to add this, you're not alone because we're here for you too. That's why we do Refuge. That's why I have 20 volunteer leaders who come, not paid, just here faithfully every week to love on you, to do small groups with you, because they love you and they want to be here for you. Don't be afraid to talk to them. Don't be afraid to go one-on-one. Say, hey, I'm going through this change. I'm going to handle it. Odds are they've been stretched in that way before, and they can help you. And they can point you back to how God's helped them. God stayed with them. God grew them, and how they're looking forward in faith to the wonderful things God has done and is doing in their life and yours. Because when it comes to change in your family, your perspective, your thinking on it matters. So let's ask God for the strength and for the grace to get our minds in the right place as we face change in this world. All right, guys, I miss you. Love you. I can't wait till you personally are back in the room if you're watching this video. We're here Wednesdays at 6:30. Hope to see you soon. Bye.